Right, well look, thank you very much for coming along. Welcome to Rodney Wayne Newmarket. Apologies to any poor people who just wanted to get their hair cut this morning, but we promise this will be brief. This is buzz cut season for red tape and regulation at salons up and down New Zealand. We are taking a serious trim to the amount of pointless bureaucracy, really shaving it back to the scalp where it's no longer needed, because it's critical that people up and down this country who run small businesses can spend more time doing what they want to do and less time complying with pointless rules and regulations. This won't be the biggest reform that the government makes, but it's important to a group of businesses that have been ignored for far too long. A salon like this will pay $150 to $500 a year to get inspections by the council, which are absolutely pointless for the salon and for the council. What the review by the Ministry for Regulation found is that most of the rules are either so silly they're ignored or so obvious they're being done anyway, meaning absolutely no value is generated. The savings up and down the country are about $1 million a year. Some will say, what's $1 million in the context of the whole economy? I say, how many times do you see a government actually removing rules that aren't needed, actually saving money year after year to make it easier to get on with our lives so we can live healthier, wealthier and longer lives? This change will mean, for example, that if you have customers with a pooch, you can decide if you want the dog to be able to come in, because really, in what sort of society does a government have to decide if people bring their dog while they get their hair cut? Rules around how many basins you have and how far apart. I think the hairdressers and barbers of New Zealand can figure that out for themselves, and I don't think the council really needs to be involved in coming in to check it out for them, most of the time not making any difference anyway. There's also been a question over whether or not you should be able to have a glass of wine. Now, bear in mind, this is a 10 a.m. stand-up, so we're not suggesting it should be done now unless the stand-up's gone on long enough for you already. However, I do believe that it should be a simple cultural thing, that if you want to be able to have a glass of wine or maybe a beer at the barber, maybe even a G&T after a long day while you get your split ends put back together, that you should be able to do that. And I don't see what the problem is that it causes. The long arm of the law has to reach in and try and stop you. So one of the things the review has recommended, and it will be taken up by the government when it gets round to making other changes to the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, is saying, you know what, just as you can give someone a sample at a wine cellar door without having to go through the rigmarole of licensing, I think you should be able to do that for a long-suffering customer at a barber or hairdresser. And you know what, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. That's how a free society works. So it's, again, not a major revolution, but it's an example of a step in the right direction, cutting red tape to make life easier, more pleasant and more joyful, doing things that you have to do rather than things that someone else wants you to do. That's it.
You mentioned the alcohol side of things, David. Will you be able to serve alcohol then when the rest of these changes come in?
The changes talked about today will come into effect on the 1st of July. The alcohol requires Parliament to change a law. The government is going to change the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act later this year, and that is when it could make the change. There's no firm decision to do that, but the Ministry for Regulation has said, this is crazy, just let people have a drink. I hope that the rest of the government will agree to make that change later this year.
And obviously these regulations have been in place for quite some time. Will the government be doing anything to make sure that hairdressers can roll this out smoothly?
Yeah, so we get rid of the regulations on the 1st of July. At the same time, we will publish guidance that says, here's what best practice looks like. We're not going to send people around to police it. It's not necessary, but we are going to give guidance. So if you want to be doing best practice, here's what it looks like.
Obviously, revoking these regulations across the board means there'll be no monitoring or enforcement of hygiene, disinfection and sanitation. Is that a gap?
No, I don't believe that there is a problem to be solved. It's a very competitive industry and the customer's already watching very carefully to make sure that it's hygienic and sanitised at any salon. So I think that problem is already solved by customer vigilance and competition amongst salons. It doesn't actually require an inspector to come in. However, one of the recommendations is that after 2 years, we will evaluate this. And look, if it turns out that I'm all wrong and your heavy-handed regulation of salons was the only thing saving New Zealand from some sort of barber apocalypse, then we can put the rules back. But I don't think that'll happen.
How much demand for these changes have you heard from the sector?
Business New Zealand came to us and said this is something that salons and barbers want to happen. Certainly, whenever I go to a salon and I ask them, what would you like? They say, get rid of the red tape and regulation. I was walking through Tauranga and a woman came out of her salon and she said, oh, good on you, keep it going. I said, what do you think of that red tape and regulation? And she said a series of words that you can't broadcast on your radio station. So there is certainly a desire out there for it.
You talk about the savings that will come as a result of getting rid of all this regulation. What was the cost of this review?
Well, there's about half a dozen people working on it for 6 months. So if you add that up, I'd say it's probably about $500,000 worth of people's time. So in 6 months, it'll pay for itself. In a year, it'll pay for itself again. And give it 10 years' time, it will have paid for itself 20 times over.
Were barbers and hairdressers aware that there were these kind of regulations, do you think?
That's the craziness of it. They're paying for the council to do the inspection, but everyone's kind of phoning it in half-heartedly. It's just an example of one of those processes. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's an example of something pointless that we don't have to do, and now you won't have to do.
Mr. Single, in the Herald today, Jim Bolger said that the Prime Minister should be much firmer with you and that you should take more of a support role to him. What's your response to that?
Well, frankly, Jim Bolger had a good time as Prime Minister. He also was in a coalition government which lasted 2 years and fell apart. I think Chris Luxon, Winston Peters and I are actually showing the way for a coalition that is sustainable to work.
I was with Erica Stanford the other day. She said to direct this question to you. What is the future of the school lunch program based on the fact that it's only funded for another year?
Well, that will have to be decided by the entire Cabinet. Right now, we have taken something that was unfunded for this year and next year. We have funded it for this year and next year. We'll have to make more decisions about what happens after that. It may just continue as it is right now, or we may see further opportunity to improve it. I'll be taking documents to Cabinet in the next few months where I just start asking my colleagues, including Erica Stanford, what do you think of this? Where do we take it so that we can get a solution that works for everybody? What I've done is I've taken this thing, I've stabilised it, I've halved the cost, I've fixed a bunch of problems at the outset to the point where I think it's actually working quite well now. I know people will say, well, we've got an accusation that there was a problem yesterday. Actually, 7 million meals, one problem, and it's not obvious if it was actually true or where the problem was caused. That's being solved. I think it's working pretty well altogether. Half the price, high 99 to 100% delivery, high satisfaction. Can't complain about that. Some people will, but they shouldn't. Now, where we take it next, that's what the government's got to decide collectively through the middle of this year, so we're ready for whatever happens in 2027.
Are you happy with the performance of the program so far?
Look, there's things I've been very unhappy about. They clearly made some big screw-ups in their first month, but if you look at term 2, you're seeing 99 to 100% delivery times. They had, I think, last week they had 2 days where 100% on-time delivery, 2 days with 99 point something, and I didn't see the Friday come in before I reported, but their on-time delivery is almost perfect. In terms of the quality, you're just not seeing the complaints because after some real screw-ups caused by a contractor going into liquidation in the first term, you're now seeing the meals that were originally promised delivered on time in full, people very happy, and remember, we're saving the taxpayer half the money.
On another note, the Public Service Commissioner is asking public servants to stop leaking various, we had a budget day leak, there was the police memo that was leaked to RNZ earlier. That memo to stop leaking was also leaked to RNZ. Are you concerned with the increasing number of leaks in the public service?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, I know what I believe, I know where I'm going, and I don't really care who knows it. What I would say to people in the public service is your career as a public servant is a part of your life. For all of your life, you're going to be invested in this country working. and you have no right to undermine the constitutional setup and framework that has made this country a success that you have benefited from. So just ask yourself, if you're one of these public servants leaking, you know that it's wrong, you know that what you're doing is eroding the trust in government that all of us benefit from, so ask yourself what right you have to take away from the goodwill the rest of New Zealanders depend on.
Do you think they should face any sort of repercussions for leaking if they're caught?
Well, absolutely they should face repercussions, and a number already have. I suspect that some of the people who are the people leaking would really struggle to get a job outside the cocoon of the public service because in the private sector, honesty and integrity are highly valued, and so they're exactly the sort of people who probably shouldn't be leaking.
Do you think they should be sacked if they are? And I mean, you mentioned that there have already been instances where people have faced punishment for doing so. Do you think they should be sacked?
Well, look, my view is the public service is currently far too large, and if we want to start reducing it, maybe we need to leak out a few leakers. All right, folks, can I just also say to you, I think some of the biggest news today will be a 25-point basis cut from the OCR. Relief on interest rates means serious savings for households. When the government saves money, as we have been, that means lower interest rates, less mortgage, lower costs of borrowing for business, more jobs and more money left at the end of the week. Absolutely essential the government keeps the savings going so the cuts to interest rates keep coming. Thank you very much, team. I really appreciate you coming along.